Well done to everyone who's lasted this long. Thank you very, very much. So we've got to the final part of the day. This part of the day is very dependent on you guys, to be honest. We could be done in 5 minutes. We could be here tomorrow. It is the Q&A section. So any questions that weren't answered, any new questions you may have thought of, we've put a mic in the middle of the room, which, I mean, is a bit of a pain because you have to stand up and get to, but it's right here. If you have any questions, this mic's on. Please come up and ask our panelists any questions you might have. Now.
With the chat about sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous systems, do any of you have any recommendations for tracking things like HRV or sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous systems? How do you test what nervous state people are in?
I'll take this one. I work with First Beat Technologies.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so I give patients a heart rate variability monitor to wear. And I have found that to be really insightful. I had the biggest shock of my life doing HRV monitoring on myself. And I did my husband as well because I was a bit worried that he was quite stressed out at work. So I did him and I did me. And I found that I was locked into fight or flight mode an entire weekend.
Sure.
And my husband had temporary periods of stress and then he just shrugged it off. So actually I was the bigger issue than he was. And I've had to really teach myself to do the deep breathing exercises, which work brilliantly. I've got this gadget that tells me to breathe every once in a while, and I make sure that I do that. And I've also begun to exercise more regularly and ring fence it in my diary. So I'm actually now doing a lot more practicing what I preach, and that's because of what I learned from heart rate variability monitoring. Right. So I think it's very powerful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll let someone more qualified ask a question.
Actually, a little bit related to the same. Would you refer people, because you mentioned that, oh, they might not do this breathing, that's the last, right? Refer to a CBT therapist or hypnotherapist, somebody, even Reiki, somebody who would kind of help them on a weekly basis with something they wouldn't do on their own?
I absolutely think that we should refer on for those additional modalities that would help us with the whole 360 degrees of health for our patients, because we can only do so much. And sometimes they will benefit from having a different voice, slightly different angle as well. So yeah, I think CBT, I think mindfulness, breathing methods, yoga, Pilates classes, forest bathing, you know, whatever it takes really, just to try and get them out of that fight or flight mode, I think is really very important.
Yeah, journaling. I find that when people take the time to sort of start their day writing down their intentions and you know, more positive affirmations, that has a massive effect on their capability in terms of protocol, life in general, and then having reflection time in the evening. So a lot of my clients that I see get a link to the Daily Greatness Journal. I don't know if you've come across that one. Not only is it beautiful to carry around, it also fits with Meraki brand colours, but that's not the point. So the link to the Daily Greatness Journal goes out in all of our protocols, so people can start reflecting on who they are, what do they want, and what do they need more of and do less of.
Hello. I'm quite new in practice, and the thing I'm struggling with most is knowing which supplement to use for each client, because until you've used it and had feedback on it, is there anywhere central that, apart from Natural Dead Dispensary and Amrita, how did you build your toolbox of supplements?
What I did was keep it really simple. So when I first started in practice, I worked with one supplement company and I worked with one testing company. And the reason that I did that was that I didn't have the time to learn lots and lots of different products, and I found it all very confusing. And so I worked quite closely with Nutrilink at that point, because they were very big 10 years ago in practitioner education, and they did a lot of webinars and the information was very accessible. NutriAdvance do exactly the same thing, so the Cytoplan So I just basically sat in one camp and I learned some programs and some protocols with them. And I did exactly the same with testing companies as well, where I just got across as many of their tests as possible. And then I just used a lot of testing and did a lot of supplement programs. And then after a while, you get a sense of what works. It's quite rudimentary, actually. A lot of the time you're working on instinct, and I think one of the things that I still want to do, which I know is ongoing at the moment, I think Miguel is working very closely with BANT around a tracking system where you are tracking patient outcomes in response to programs and protocols that you put people on. And I think there's a real value in trying to do that. But I also work with a little team of other nutritionists as well. So we feed back to each other what works and what doesn't work. So after a while, we get a sense of what is helpful. So I guess that's really what experience is all about. But that's really how I've worked.
Yeah, I think alongside what works and what doesn't work, it's what's new, because there are always new supplements coming on the market that are better quality. I would agree with going along to as many seminars as possible. BioCare do a great job, NutriAdvance do a great job. So get your CPD and learn about the supplements and go along to those webinars.
Hi team. Karen, this is for you. You've got quite a young business. It's obviously great you're presenting today, more people finding out about you. Just interested to know like how you're getting on and maybe some learnings, because obviously we're pulling apart things, we're going down rabbit holes around nutrition, gut, but I don't think the kind of conversation around, you know, running a business and pushing services, like you said there, thinking about packages and how you're working. I just thought it'd be good for the room to hear that. I'd be interested. Yeah, of course, I'd love to share some of that with you. So my first piece of advice is to get out there and do things that are really uncomfortable. Talk to as many people as possible. Tell everybody what you do, whether it's at the school gates, whether it's down the pub, whether it's, you know, lady at the checkout in Sainsbury's. Just build it into conversation wherever you go, and get on social media. But contact as many people as possible that you admire, that you look up to, and ask them what they did and how they go about it. Make friends with your account managers in testing companies, and yeah, and get great testimonials as well, and share them and keep resharing them, because people want to hear case studies and real people. And keep it simple, keep your message simple as well, because I think people are afraid of nutrition and think it's really complicated, and we've got to find a way to translate what we've learnt today and what we've talked about into the real world and make it relevant. There's so many things that we learn along the way. So moving away from the traditional CNM model of initial appointment and a follow-up 4 weeks later, it just doesn't work, because clients get to week 3, they've lost their way, they've had a big social event, and then they put off coming back to see you because they want to get back on track, but they never do get back on track, and then you just lost them. So definitely think about packages, because you just keep that momentum going. After 7 days, you know if they're struggling or if they're coping, and how far you want to push them. So packages have been, you know, revelationary for us. And also don't be afraid to put your prices up. I think there is an issue in our industry where people are undervaluing the knowledge that they've got and the amount of money they've spent on their education and not reflecting it in their prices. And that's really hard, because think of the other practitioners around you. It's like you're keeping that benchmark low. So coming out of CNM and charging £40 or £60 for an hour's consultation kind of tells the world that you are inexperienced. And yeah, you might be, but look at other people that are charging £250 an hour in your area, and really push yourself and be brave. Be brave is my answer for that when you're starting out. Thanks. The only other question was the, Trace, I think it was the dairy-free colostrum brand. Interested in that? I don't know if you told us, I couldn't remember.
I don't think I mentioned it. It's on Amrita, and okay. I think it's called Mega 2000 dairy-free colostrum.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo your points, actually. In September last year, I took the plunge and moved away from a pay-as-you-go model onto a program and package basis. And I did this with help from Zest, who I signed up with in the late summer. And today I have 20 package patients, and it was very surprising to me how easy it was to switch over and work with people on a program and package basis. So I worry less now about those emails that are consultations by stealth, because I've packaged up a certain amount of extra time in my packages with patients where I feel like I'm covered to comment and to go back to patients. So yeah, and I'd echo everything you said.
Hi there. I do a lot of stool testing and SIBO testing, and I see a lot of people with SIBO. What do you suggest if somebody's got, like, had a lot of abdominal surgery and got lots of adhesions and that sort of thing, and you're just not getting rid of it?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good point. So adhesions affect the motility of the gut and will make SIBO keep rebounding. So there's a company called Clear Passage. It sounds like a drain company, based in actually the US, but they've got a UK office, and they specialize in the kind of visceral breakdown of adhesions and scar tissue. I think it's quite expensive from what I understand, but I do think that there are other visceral working practitioners that can do something really similar.
Yeah.
So so I'd look at doing something like that.
Okay. Because like with the ileocecal valve, if they've got any sort of issues, structural issues there, then I refer on to a chiropractor who's been really great. Yeah. But yeah, it's just knowing who else I can refer to when I've got a really stubborn case and I just don't know what to do other than refer them to a gastroenterologist for, like, you know, antibiotics, and then at the end of the day, it's probably going to come back anyway.
I think it might be worth trying to speak to Clear Passage and finding out if there's some people that do something similar, or, you know, I'm not sure what their price point is, to be honest with you, but I had one patient do it, and it's quite intensive, where they pretty much work on you every day, and then they give you exercise that you do at home as well, and I think it's quite a continuous thing. And I think there might be a value in using enzyme therapy as a way of breaking down scar tissue, but of course that depends on how old the scars are and, you know, how extensive it is really. But it's a difficult one, and I think if somebody has got adhesions that are promoting SIBO return, I think it's important to manage patient expectations as far as what you're going to be able to do for them. And it might just be that you tell them that it's unlikely you're ever going to be SIBO clear, but we can put a management program in place, which is going to be, you know, partly diet and partly antimicrobial herbs on and off, you know, and other things, and work on stress response and those kinds of things. And maybe even work with their local GP. You might find an occasional dose of 5 days of amoxicillin might be enough to subside SIBO for several months at a time. So we can't always fix it completely.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I was just wondering, do you use any particular kind of software to track your patient's progress? And if so, what?
Myself and Amy have just moved across to Practice Better, and we're really enjoying it. I like the way that each client gets a portal to log into to log their symptoms and how they feel. You can also upload documents, and they can share documents with you, like food diaries, but it all gets stored under one client profile. It's purpose built for what we do for practitioners. Very, very easy to use. You can brand it, integrates with your calendar. You can book appointments online, take payments up front, which again was another thing that we implemented quite quickly, was getting payment before we see them. So yeah, I use Practice Better. We were using sort of like, you know, standard manual way of working, but the admin is just so heavy that it saved us hours moving on to Practice Better.
So I signed up with Practice Better, but I have a situation where I have 3 nutritionists that I work with that are self-employed. So we have to be careful around. So at the moment, Practice Better is not set up for teams, as I understand it, but I think that's going to change. So we use a bit of Clinico, and I use Pinocchio actually as something that I use for writing client plans. So that's kind of what I use at the moment.
I was contacting them just a few days ago, and they are working on having the clinic set up in probably a month or something like that.
Yeah,
because I have a clinic where we have like 15 therapists, and that's what I was.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I hear great things about Practice Better. Yeah, so if it's a month, that would be brilliant.
I think we have a couple questions from the webinar users. The first one is, how do you tackle Candida in the chronically immunosuppressed patients, in example, HIV or those on autoimmune medications?
Okay, good question. So with people with compromised immunity and tackling Candida, which obviously is going to take advantage of having compromised immunity, my instinct would be low and slow. I think you've got to work with the innate immune system. I think if they're severely immunocompromised or they're on medications that are suppressing their immune system, probiotics might be contraindicated. So I think that would be potentially problematic. I think you might need to support the immune system maybe with the stress response, adaptogenic herbs. You could still do some gut healing, work on diet, keep that kind of as clean as possible, look at things like polyphenols, flavonoids, detoxification pathways. What else could you do? So ordinarily with Candida, I would be using things like, you could use colostrum, probably Saccharomyces boulardii, there might be a slight problem with that. But I would be kind of tempted to look towards doing something like that. And maybe very low doses of things like caprylic acid. Yeah, maybe some bone broth. I think you're going to have to try and work on the whole 360 degrees of the person, and low and slow, gentle.
Perfect, thank you. Another couple questions we have revolving around which HRV monitor would you recommend / do you use?
I use First Beat, but there is another one. Yeah, HeartMath. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so those are, I think, the two that are widely available in the UK.
Which two of them again, sorry?
HeartMath and First Beat.
Perfect. There was another question here. Can Candida be passed back and forth between couples?
Yes.
Okay. There was, how many consultations would there be in these packages, or would you have in a package?
Okay, so we do different lengths of packages. We've got a 6-week package for somebody that's perhaps got a relatively balanced lifestyle but just needs a little bit of help. Maybe they're training for a sporting event, or they've got a holiday or a wedding or something. Then we've got a slightly longer package that's 12 weeks. So that's somebody that might have some health concerns that have been flagged by the GP and really want a more thorough look at their diet and lifestyle. And then 6 months for somebody that probably has got a chronic illness and needs a little bit of long-term help. So a 6-week package would involve 1 face-to-face. All of our initial appointments are face-to-face, as much as we can enforce that, and then 5 30-minute follow-up calls. So that's your 6 weeks. For 12 weeks, it would be 2 face-to-face. So 1 at the beginning, 1 in the middle, and then in between it's weekly calls of 30 minutes. And then the 6-month package, I think, has got 4 face-to-face, and then all the other weeks are 30-minute calls. For the longer package, the 6-month package, we have a pick and mix list as well, where they can throw in either a functional test or a pantry cleanup or a meal prep session, or we call it like a concierge service, where they can pop something in there that's quite useful to get them through. They're the people that need the most help, so we try and give the most support in the longer packages.
Perfect, thank you. And I think another one to all of you is, how do you guys ensure that you're HIPAA / GDPR compliant?
Listen to what BANT tell you to do.
Yeah, I mean, follow BANT guidelines and use software programs which are compliant as well.
Perfect, thank you. Does anybody else in the room have any further questions? Yeah, go for it.
It was just an aside to the point you raised. I'm a private GP. I work with a gastroenterologist who does a lot of stuff around SIBO for Brahmin, and they use rifaximin, 550 milligrams 3 times a day for I think about 10 days or 2 weeks to treat SIBO. Although it is quite expensive, and I don't think any NHS GPs will prescribe it. And the other thing that I mean, I've sort of been reading a lot, and I think fungi seem really interesting. I suppose, I mean, do you guys sort of tell people to take lion's mane or cordyceps or anything like that?
Amy, my business partner, is very big into mushrooms. She knows a lot more about, you know, the therapeutic elements of using mushrooms. I'm not so well versed in that. That's probably not my go-to, but it's definitely something I want to learn about. But there is so much evidence and really good information, like from places like doTERRA on mushrooms, and lion's mane is popping up a lot. If anyone subscribes to the ICAM magazine, there's usually a mention in there every month when that comes out.
Yeah, ditto. It's on my to-do list, the whole mushroom thing. Just picking up on rifaximin and availability in the UK, there are a couple of private pharmacies where patients can buy direct, and the dosage is right. The most recent research is 550 milligrams 3 times daily for 2 weeks as being optimal for clearing SIBO. Yeah, there's one that name escapes me actually. I can take your card and give you the details. I've got it on my email. So yeah, it's actually a patient found it, and I contacted them and found out that it's around about £270 per 2-week course. So, but I am finding increasingly that GPs will prescribe off script, and they will they'll charge for it, but it seems to be a bit more available than it was.
Can I ask one small one? Karen, when you did your case studies earlier, you talked about 2 very different characters who probably had 2 very different lifestyles. How did you deal with the different personalities when it came to compliance to what you wanted them to do to help them out?
Well, I used to be a rock star once, so having walked in Olivia's shoes, I was able to anticipate when she was going to have her, you know, her moments where she was off plan. I think you've just got to make the effort to understand their lifestyle. That's part of the consultation process. We're not just here to hear symptoms and what they're eating. It's like, who are they really? And to get them to trust you very quickly to open up. I struggle when parents are involved. So Freya's mum was very much involved in the sessions that she came along to, but that was a genuine concern for her mental health. So I try to see people without their spouses and their mums so that they can open up a bit more and you can get some real dialogue going. But I think just making them feel comfortable as quickly as possible, get to know them as quickly as possible, follow them on Instagram if you have to. It's not ideal, but it worked for me because, you know, I knew what the next consultation was going to be. Yeah, just everyone's individual. You've got to adjust your practitioner personality to each of your clients. It's not a one size fits all, and that's not just about diet, that's about how you approach it as well.
I would just say also that we can't sit in judgment of the people that we see. There'll be some people that naturally are people that are just like you and you feel like you understand them and you instinctively like them, and other people that you don't really understand them, but you don't have to necessarily. But we don't have to like what they do, but you do have to kind of get into their mode in order to be able to work with them effectively, but we can't judge them. That's really important.
As far as using mushrooms, I know it's not, with Epstein-Barr virus, because of the pathogenic nature of mushrooms, I think it might be a bit of a dodgy thing. Same as glandulars. I know this is not much about the gut, but have you any thoughts about any of that? Any views?
Yeah, I don't think I can comment really, except I would say that I think the majority of us in this room have got Epstein-Barr virus titers in our bloodstream. So I think if using mushrooms was a real problem, then it would be more obvious. We'd know about it, you know. So I think maybe where you're going is really what mushrooms are proposed to do, and that has to modulate the immune system, and maybe the concern would be that you'd upregulate the immune system or have it hyper respond to Epstein-Barr or something like that would be, I think, where you're going with that.
Okay.
But I don't feel like I'm qualified to comment beyond that. Sorry.
Okay.
Hello, I originally had only 2 questions, but following that I had 3, so I'll start with that question. Most of my patients, 98% of them, as you said, when I test for Epstein-Barr virus, they have it previously or actively. Is it still relevant to actually test for Epstein-Barr virus in terms of our clinical decisions that we take? My second question is about choice of supplements. It's not one of you, but there was another presenter who said that piperine, which for years has been studied to increase the bioavailability of curcumin by 2000%. Now if we are thinking piperine causes leaky gut because piperine has an effect on intestinal permeability, which can be interpreted both positively or negatively, how do we as practitioners really delineate whether we should go for curcumin with piperine, or should we now be thinking of liposomal, which has become a very new trend to think about liposomal delivery of various ingredients. My third question is, I get patients who go from one functional medicine practitioner to another from different parts of the world. They've done all the tests. The SIBO has been treated. If they're been diagnosed with Candida, phase 1 antifungal, phase 2 antifungal, parasites has been treated, they still feel unwell. So where do we look for solutions in such cases? Is there a way how, as functional medicine doctors, we could also collaborate with each other so that we reduce the cost and the time that the patient would need to spend in terms of actually not becoming victims of our own perspective of how we diagnose and treat?
Okay, so question 1 was something to do with Epstein-Barr virus from the point of view of saying that 98% of people will have EBV titers. And your point was there, would we still test in that instance? Yeah, so my take on Epstein-Barr virus is I think from a functional medicine perspective, we understand that having a bug doesn't necessarily mean that we have an illness. It's really a question of the bug and the environment in us that determines whether we have an illness. So it's different and it's more subtle. What I understand about viruses and Epstein-Barr virus is, contrary to perhaps more of an orthodox medicine perspective, we don't believe that viruses are ever truly dormant. We think that they sit around in cells, but they are watching and waiting to cause mischief at a point when the individual is immune compromised or otherwise distracted. And as such, they are still a distraction on the immune system, and they're still drawing resources away from your immune system. So I think that you have to look at, I would be inclined to use something like a chronic viral panel and look for an ELISpot test to look and see if there was a cellular activity to viruses, and use that as a basis of whether I decided that I was going to try and address the virus or not. And that would be the way I would look at it. And I think also with viruses, pretty much like Lyme and other chronic infections, it's about supporting the whole body and working on the whole immune system, rather than just thinking you're going to go in and try and nuke it with antivirals. Anyone else got any comments on that? Enjoyed that. Thank you. Sorry, your second question was, got out of my head.
We were referring to seeing multiple practitioners and how to sort of say that again. How to align it. It's tricky because when I speak to practitioners, you know, generally
there are patients out there who go from practitioner to practitioner to practitioner. They've had multiple tests, sometimes the same tests over and over and over again. And it's difficult to, I suppose you have to deal with the patient at hand that's coming and presenting to you, rather than maybe dealing with what they've done previously. You deal with the patient that's sitting in front of you, I would say. I don't know of any way of, there is always the way of discussing it or trying to contact their previous practitioners and doing that. But as far as an alliance with them, or a way of, or a system, or a program that allows you to align that with them, unless the patient is willing to share all those results with you or gives you permission to do that, it makes it difficult with GDPR and things like that to be able to discuss previous test results and with other practitioners or with the current practitioner, if that makes sense.
I've actually, I had this really interesting situation where I had a new patient appointment. I'd seen the lady once. She turned up with a lever arch file full of tests that she had done on herself. And I would just say that all my alarm bells were starting to go off when I could see that she'd got some sticky name labels in bronze of her name that she'd put over the practitioner details and all of the test reports. And these test reports, like I said, they were going back for several months, every test ever known to man. And also she was a bit bitter and twisted. She was very quick to say, oh, and I saw this person, they were supposed to be an expert and they didn't help me at all. And I remember sitting there just thinking, this person is trouble and I need to get myself out of this situation really quickly. And as luck would have it, I think I saw her like on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and I was at a seminar on the Saturday, and I bumped into a friend of mine who's also a functional medicine nutritionist. And I told the story. I went, oh, I had this lady this week, and she turned up with a lever arch file, and she's got X, Y, and Z, and my alarm bells were running. And my friend said, is her name Claire? And I went, yes. And she went, don't judge her with a barge pole. She was a nightmare. She complained about me, and she sent me these terrible emails. And so the point is, it would be lovely, really lovely, if we could have some kind of blacklist thing where we can put these patients up and share our stories. But GDPR means, and patient confidentiality means that we can't do that. We can't have that kind of blacklist kind of thing. I would say that what we've got to do is get our instincts really well honed, so that when you've got that person in front of you that turns up with that lever arch file, you're like, okay, now, so, and actually maybe, those kind of getting to know each other calls, the 15 minutes beforehand, that are a bit of a pain to do sometimes, but you can flush out people quite often. A few tactical questions. I actually have an appointment request form, which is my first stab at trying to feel my way around this patient and understand if they're likely to be challenging. And it's got things on there like, have you seen other practitioners? Would you do functional testing? Are you vegan? Because that can be challenging. But, there are some kind of tactical questions that can be, kind of a little bit ambiguous, that you might actually trap someone into telling you something that would just give you a sense. And I would just trust your instinct, would be my best recommendation, really. So any comments?
Have you ever fired a client, Tracy?
Yes.
Me too.
I actually fired 3 last year because I'd seen them 14 times each, and I felt like I got to a point where I could see them in the diary, and I just thought, I think I'm a rubbish practitioner because I can't fix this person, I can't help them, I'm missing something, I am looking at them through one lens, and they would be better off seeing someone else that is going to look at them from a different angle. And that can be a tricky conversation, because I didn't want to say, look, I think I'm really rubbish and you need to see someone else. I just said, look, I've done some reflection on your case. This is our 15th appointment together. I know that you're disappointed with your lack of progress. I share that as well, because I'm on this journey with you. And I've come to the reluctant conclusion that I might not be the best practitioner for you, and you might be better seeing someone that is going to see you with a different set of patient experience, and that might be, you know, to your advantage. And so I did 3 of those last year, and it was one of the best things I've ever did. Yeah.
I think we've got a little bit of time for the last couple of questions from the webinar attendees. Starting with, are there any FODMAP training, further training courses that you practitioners could recommend?
Yeah, there are. I'm trying to think the ones that I've done. So I did a really good one with Anthony Haynes and Christine Bailey, which was a Nutrilink one, which I'm not sure if they're running it this year, but you might be able to buy it from Nutrilink Stable. So that might be something to do. There's actually some stuff online with Patsy Katsos, who's quite big on FODMAPs, and there might also be some quite nice stuff around Monash University as well, which obviously is the home of FODMAPs. Those would be the areas that I would go to for FODMAP training.
Thank you. The next question is following on from mushrooms. Can individuals with a sensitivity to molds have a problem with mushroom supplements?
I reckon so, yes. I would say so. I think my understanding of people with molds, which is something that I'm getting introduced to more and more now with some of the patients I've seen recently, is that something like 25% of the population can't deal with mycotoxins, so they're very, very sensitive to mold spores in every shape and form. So I think that might be contraindicated for those people. And I think there is some genetic testing that can be done looking at HLA genes and know whether they are mold sensitive. And I would be very, very cautious about using mushroom therapy for those people. And that includes things like Saccharomyces boulardii as well.
Following on from contraindications, a question here is asking you guys to explain a little more about Candida and probiotic contraindications.
I'm not sure what the question.
Sorry, I worded that very badly.
Yeah, sorry.
The question is, can you explain a little more about Candida and probiotic contraindications, please?
I don't think there's a problem with using probiotics with Candida. I think that may be a follow-on point from the immune-suppressed person.
You could be right.
Yeah.
Apologies.
So I think maybe that's it. But otherwise, I would use probiotics definitely as a way of kind of crowding out the Candida, and I would definitely use Saccharomyces boulardii, provided the person didn't have a yeast allergy.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions from any other practitioners in the room? I think not. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. If we could.
I'll have one more.
Sorry.
With SIBO, are you seeing more people that once you treated the SIBO or a comorbid might be CFO?
Yes, good question. Around 24% of patients with SIBO will have a concurrent yeast overgrowth. And it's kind of logical, really, that if yeast is commensal in us and if we're immune compromised, then the yeast will take advantage of the same set of circumstances that help bacteria to overgrow and, you know, to take the opportunity to overgrow as well. So I think we have to be mindful of that and maybe use antimicrobials, which are also somewhat antifungal. Or if we get to a point where someone is has SIBO retested and apparently negative, but they don't feel any better, then you've got to think that maybe there's something fungal going on, and that you then start working with them in that way.
Any more? All right, perfect. Oh.
Complement that, I have seen the issue of SIBO in many patients who have been treated for SIBO with antibiotics, especially the ones who have had multiple courses. Especially the ones that have had multiple courses of antibiotics. Fungal problems come, and not just in the gut, but in many other places in the body as well, but obviously in the gut first, but as well.
Yeah. I think it's less of a problem with rifaximin, but if people are seeing a orthodox GP or gastroenterologist, then they might be on things like metronidazole, ciprofloxacin, amoxicillin in rotation, and they're broad spectrum, and that would just set the scene for yeast, definitely.
I actually have a yeast sensitivity and have Epstein-Barr virus and have been hospitalized many years ago. Is there any way that we can get yeast as a allergen on labels for people? Because it can cause quite a lot of problems for people like
labels of what? Because it does appear on food labels.
Yeah, but like having it as a allergen, they have boiled wheat.
I think they do. They do. Certainly the supplements on Natural Dispensary will often say there are 14 allergens, and it will lay out if it's got yeast in it.
Yeah, but I mean food and.
It appears on food labels. It has to.
Okay. I mean, like as an allergen, it's bold. Yeah, it does. I believe you. Thank you.
All right, no worries, guys. Any more? No. In that case, one final round of applause, please, for the panelists. Thank you for their time.
Okay.
So we have made it to the end of the day. I want to thank everyone for giving us their time. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank Andrea for giving us your information, your knowledge. It was very valued, I think. And from us at Genova, I want to say thank you so much. We're now going to put the card behind the bar. You're more than welcome to join us. I know it's 4 o'clock. I've got a problem. But if you guys want to follow us for a drink, you're more than welcome to. One thing I would ask, there are some feedback forms in your pack. If you could just give us, they're anonymous, be honest, be brutal, but we'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it all.